Right guys, welcome to a new video. This is the long awaited part 3 of the garden makeover. So a little bit long winded, but hope you enjoy. So for the last week and a half it's been raining non-stop, so I've not been able to get anything done. I need to paint all the timber prior to building the lean-to, because it's going to be a lot easier to paint it before I build it rather than building it and then trying to paint it once it's up. I'm going to try and get 2 coats on all the woodwork, and then if I need to touch anything up once it's built, I can do it. So the paint we're using is by Ronseal. It's the Fence Life Plus range. We've gone for Tudor Black Oak, and this is great value paint. I think we paid £9.99 for 5 litres. So it's meant to rain later on in the day, so I'm trying to get as much of the woodwork painted before the rain comes, and then that way I can at least start building it. And just in case anyone's wondering, I have speeded this footage up slightly. I'd love to be able to paint this quick, but not even I'm that fast. So with the woodwork painted with 2 coats of Ronseal Tudor Black Oak, we checked the weather forecast and we were due a couple of dry days. So we went online to see how much it would cost to hire a compactor for 24 hours, and it turns out that HSS, which is our nearest hire centre, only charge £41. So we arranged online to pick it up the same day and return it 24 hours later. And the staff at HSS were really helpful. They showed me how to operate the machine, and that was it. As you can see, I've soaked the area prior to compacting it, and that keeps the dust down and helps to bind the hardcore together. I'm actually quite glad the other compactor broke down, because that was a heavy duty one and was quite hard on your arms when using it, whereas this is classed as a light duty compactor, and it's actually so much easier to use, and I did actually enjoy using it. So excuse the shaky camera work. I wanted to kind of give you a close-up view of the compactor being used. So I'm actually using it with one hand. That's so much easier than the other one this is to use, because there's no way I'd have been able to operate the other one with one hand. But I thought you guys might appreciate a more in-depth close-up view of the compactor in action. So the way I was doing it was to go over the whole area a couple of times, then I'd stop to wet down the whole area again, just to keep it damp on the surface, and then I would repeat the process and go over it a couple of times, and I would say the whole thing probably took me a couple of hours, just going backwards and forwards, and so I didn't really need it for 24 hours, but as I had it, I did repeat the process quite a number of times just to make sure it was well and truly compacted, and I was quite happy with the way the machine actually worked. As you can see, this is after going round it quite a few times, and you can already see just how well it's compacted it. So as you can see, after going over the whole area a million times, it's well and truly compacted and feels really solid underfoot. Well impressed with how the machine worked, and even though this was a light duty one, because I went over it and made multiple passes, it's done a really good job of like packing all the hardcore down. And prior to compacting the second layer, I graded it as best I could using my longest spirit level in order to kind of slope it slightly away from the house. Happy days. So I thought I'd run through just how easy it is to use one of these machines. You've got the on-off switch, you've got your fuel on and off, you've got your choke, which obviously you use when the engine's cold, and you've got your throttle. So in order to start the machine, if it's not been run for a while and it's cold, you have to put the choke on. Then you turn the fuel on, and obviously turn the main switch to on, and then you simply pull on the starting cord and it'll fire up. So to get it to vibrate, you just adjust the throttle and it will eventually start to vibrate, and it's really that easy to use. And obviously once it's running and warmed up, you can like turn the choke off, and then obviously when you finish using it, just switch it off, turn the fuel off, and that's basically it. And this runs, this 4-stroke engine, and it runs on normal unleaded fuel, so you ain't got all the faffing about with mixing it. So now it's time to start building the lean-to, and because I'm working on my own, I have to come up with ways to kind of do things on my own. So the first problem I had was how to hold the rim joist, I think that's what it's called, in place in order to drill through it and mark the hole locations ready for the anchor bolts. So to hold it in place, I basically used two of the pieces, one post and one length of 6x2, propped up against the wall, and then I could kind of adjust it until I had it perfectly straight, and then it was just a case of drilling through the timber, marking the locations for the holes, and then once that was done, I could simply, with a smaller masonry bit, drill first with the small bit, and then once the hole was done I could swap the bits round and use the 16mm masonry bit to drill the correct size hole. So to attach it to the house, I'm going to be using these anchor bolts, and it's just a case of drill a 16mm diameter hole, insert the sleeve into the hole, and then put the bolt through the timber that you're attaching to the house and into the sleeve, and then as you tighten it up the sleeve expands and holds it all in place. They're quite simple to use, but if you hammer them in too hard they do tend to fall apart on you, so you've got to be fairly gentle when you use these. So with all the holes drilled and ready to go, I simply inserted the bolts through the piece of timber, and then I could hold it in position, and I basically started off all the bolts to make sure they were all located in the holes, and then I could finish tightening them up. I just used a ratchet spanner to tighten them up, and once these are tight they ain't going nowhere, so they're really good. So the bit attached to the house is all bolted and in place. I had to do it in two pieces because the timbers I'm using are 3 meters long and the overall width of the lean-to is just short of 5 meters. And you can see that I've also bolted the right hand rafter onto the side of the neighbour's house in the corner of our garden, and here I'm just using the spirit level to cut the front end so it's sitting straight. I'll just do that with a spirit level and then chop it off with a circular saw. So this is the first post that I need to cut down to height, so I chop it down to its final height first using my circular saw by rotating it and eventually cutting all the way through. And I've decided I don't want to concrete the posts directly into the ground because we all know wooden fence posts tend to rot out at ground level. So in order for these to last as long as possible, I went to Tool Station and picked up these brackets. I think I paid a few quid each, and they're designed to bolt to the bottom of the 4x4 post, and they've actually got a bolt hole in the bottom which you can bolt down directly to the concrete. But I'm just going to fit them, and I'm actually going to suspend the post in the hole and then concrete around the bracket. So the anchor bolts I'm using are ones that I had left over from my deck build that I done. They are too long, so they're going to need cutting down. And the only other problem I had was these have got the square bit just under the head of the bolt. So when you put them into a round hole in the wood, the square bit bites into the wood, and you can put the nut on. It stops it from spinning. But because of the thickness of the bracket itself, the bolt was just spinning and the square bit wasn't engaging in the wood, so I had to try and hold the round head of the bolt with a pair of pliers as best I could and tighten up the nuts on the other side, which I eventually managed to do. And then obviously I just chop those down with a hacksaw once they're in place. So I want the front of the frame itself to sit on the post slightly. So what I'm doing is notching out the top part of each post, and I just make a series of cuts with the circular saw, whack it out with a hammer, and then you can clean it up with an old chisel. I was going to originally just bolt the frame to the side of the post, but I thought it'd probably be a lot stronger if I had the front piece on the lean-to actually sitting on top of the frame slightly, and that'll help distribute the weight a bit more. So that's why I decided to do that in the end. So to attach the first post, I decided the easiest way for me to do it would be to simply attach the post with clamps to the rafter and let it drop down into the hole. Then I could plumb it on all four sides and clamp it tight and simply add the cement around the bracket and cement it in place. Just in case the added weight of the post wanted to pull on the rafter, I added some offcuts of scrap timber clamped to the original fence just to support the weight of the underside of the rafter, and then I could obviously concrete the first post in, and then when that was dry, in order to get the second post in position, I first put it through the middle of my step ladder and clamped it in place so it dropped down into the hole. Then I attached the front piece of the lean-to so I could get it exactly the right distance from the first post, and then after a lot of careful measuring to ensure it was equal distance from the house to the post as the first post, I can then mix up a mix of concrete and get the middle post concreted in place. Now, I'm no expert at mixing concrete. I used a bag of ballast to about 1/4 bag of blue circle cement, and I mixed it together dry and then just kept adding small amounts of water and mixing it until it was a right consistency, or so I thought, and then I could concrete the middle post in place. So the first mix was too wet. The second mix I think may have been a tad too dry, but they both set fairly quickly, so it's good enough for me. So it doesn't have to look pretty because this is all going to be covered up in the long run anyway, so just give it a quick tamp down and job's a good one. So the last thing to do before it sets is just check on all sides to make sure it's still plumb, and that's it, job done. So fitting the end post in position was a little bit easier than the middle one, because I could put the other front piece in place and the end rafter, and then I knew exactly where the post needed to be. So I used exactly the same method as I did on the centre one, as in using my step ladder and clamping the post in the centre, making sure that the front piece and the end rafter were sitting square on the post where they needed to be, and that the post was plumb, and then I could mix up the final batch of concrete and get the last post concreted in. So you can see that the end rafter and the front piece is attached to the post using clamps. The post has been dropped down into the hole and plumbed on all four sides so it's sitting straight. The front piece has been put in position temporarily and levelled, and so it sits level on the top, and also the front two pieces are dead straight and in line with each other. And once I've checked the measurements a few times and checked the levels, I can then mix up the final batch of concrete and get the last post concreted in place, and that's the hardest part done. Right, that's going to do it for part 3. In part 4, I'm going to be making a start on the rafters and hopefully getting round to fitting the polycarbonate sheet in on the roof and adding all the different bits of trim. So look out for part 4. As always, I want to thank my regular subscribers for watching the videos and supporting the channel. I want to give a big welcome to all the new subscribers that have joined recently. And if you're watching this video for the first time and you're not a subscriber, then hit that subscribe button, tap the little bell icon, and you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. So until then, stay safe and you'll see me in the next video. Cheers for watching, guys.